Hello everybody, I am Rocket and welcome back to Biology in a Nutshell. So today, last time we were looking at DNA, how it works, what it's made up of, and what it actually does. Today we're going to be looking at RNA, which is the other nucleic acid, which I mentioned what nucleic acids were last time. They're one of the four main biological molecules. So, now, last time we ended with what is DNA? We know it's deoxyribonucleic acid, we know that it's found in the nucleus of cells, and we know that most of the time it's just a big squiggly line, but then it comes together to make chromosomes when a cell splits. But how does that go from being a big squiggly line of a spiral ladder to making your body? What's the process? Because there's a massive hole in that process there, isn't there? What we're going to be doing today is examining what that process is and how it works. This is Biology in a Nutshell with me, Rocket. And we're back. So, let's look at that again. We know what DNA is, we know what it does, but we're now going to find out how it does it. So you have your double helix spiral of DNA. Now there's this other nucleic acid called RNA. What happens is this protein called RNA polymerase, which is a complex name, I know, it's pretty cool. It splits the DNA strand wide open, and it allows this RNA to come in and to slot itself onto one side of the DNA, and this is called an RNA transcript. Now this process is called transcription. So it works sort of like DNA. It's got the different nucleobases, there they are there, that DNA have, but there's a difference. DNA has cytosine and guanine going together, and adenine and thymine going together. The difference in RNA is cytosine and guanine go together again, but rather than going with thymine, adenine goes with this other chemical called uracil. Not to be confused with urine, that's something completely different. I'll come to at a later date. So uracil, we already mentioned what the chemical formulas for the others were last time. Uracil is C4H4N2O2, which means it's slightly smaller than thymine, but it's really about the same sort of size as the other nucleobases, which we looked at last time. So, you've now got this RNA, which is like half a DNA strand. It's a mononucleotide rather than a poly or dinucleotide like a DNA. I want to point out that once the RNA is finished, the RNA polymerase leaves and the DNA goes back to being its sort of squiggly spiral ladder self, and then that's fine. But this RNA is now the important bit we're focusing on. We've left DNA behind now, we're on RNA. But how, so now you've got half of DNA, but how does that go to create your body? That's what we're going to be looking at now. So basically what it does is it floats out and it leaves the nucleus, which is sort of like the brain of the cell, but it's nowhere near as complex. And it leaves the nucleus through these little holes called pores. Now your body's covered in pores. You sweat or perspire through pores. Different hormones are released through pores. You get the idea. They're basically little holes through which different things leave the body, or leave certain parts of the body to go to other parts of the body. In this case, they leave the nucleus of the cell. The RNA leaves the nucleus of the cell and enters the cytoplasm, which is the jelly bit all around the nucleus. Once it's out there, though, this is where the action happens. This chemical called, well, it's not a chemical, sorry, this organelle called ribosomes comes along, and it sort of latches on to the RNA, which I point out is ribonucleic acid. Now the difference between DNA and RNA is, of course, it's nucleic acid, but DNA is deoxyribose, and RNA is ribo or ribose. Now they're slightly different chemicals, they're mainly the same. The difference of course being deoxyribose is C5H10O4, ribose is C5H10O5. It's just got that extra oxygen atom on the end. So it's the same, the spiral is again the same, that the side of the spiral, it's ribose, phosphate, ribose, phosphate, ribose, phosphate, ribose, phosphate, you get the idea. But then, like I said, the nuclear bases coming off the sides are not cytosine, guanine, adenine, thiamine, or CGA and T, as they are in DNA. They're CGA and U, cytosine, guanine, adenine, uracil, as I have just said a minute ago. So these ribosomes then latch onto this ribonucleic acid, this RNA, and it uses these ribosome keys, as it were, to these amino acid keys to lock on amino acid, and it reads the RNA every 3 nucleobases at a time, and each of them mean it's got to grab a different key, as it were, and get a different amino acid, and it reads them 3 at a time and then moves it along, and it reads every 3, and as it goes, the ribosome puts the amino acids together. Now if you've done biology at all in school, or I imagine you have at some point, you'll know that when you've got a lot of the amino acids together, they form these things called proteins, which is what everything in the body is made up of. I touched on proteins last time. They're one of the 4 main biological molecules. They're mainly found in meats. Now all living things are made up of proteins. There's lots of different types of proteins, and they're made of these amino acids. There are 20 different amino acids, and I will go into those next time, and I'll touch on ribosomes again next time. But there are 20 different amino acids, and they all form these complex polymers, which means they're made up of lots of monomers, which are amino acids, to form these proteins. And all different proteins do all sorts of different things around the body, but they're massive molecules, and everything in your body, nearly everything in your body, is made up of proteins. There are a few things like adipose tissue or fats that contain lipids, or fat, or sugar storages or starch storages in your body. But other than that, just about every living thing, every cell in your body contains at least some proteins, which means there's a lot of proteins in you, and there's over 7 billion people on this planet when I'm recording this. If you're watching this in the future, there may well be more, and I feel sorry for you if you are watching this in the future, because I'll probably be fairly outdated by then. So, let's review that briefly. DNA gets split up by this RNA polymerase, and then this RNA, or ribonucleic acid, comes in and it builds itself based on the DNA. The cytosine in the DNA means it's a guanine, the guanine on the DNA means it's a cytosine, the adenine in the DNA means it's a uracil, and the thymine in the DNA means it's an adenine. Uracil is the new chemical that doesn't appear in DNA, but it does appear in RNA. Now, of course, uracil is C4H4N2O2, like I said. It's fairly similar in size to cytosine, guanine, and adenine, but not thymine. Thymine's quite a bit bigger than all of them. And then the sides, the spiral of the RNA is the same as it is, nearly the same as it is on the DNA. The difference, of course, being it's got an extra oxygen molecule in the ribose molecule, so it's C5H10O5 rather than C5H10O4 like it is in deoxyribose, and then it's ribose phosphate, ribose phosphate, ribose phosphates. This is then read, and this then leaves the nucleus of the cell through the pores, and then is read by the ribosomes, which grabs different amino acids, reading it 3 nucleobases at a time, and grabs different amino acids, then folds them into this chain to create this awesome complex protein. So that's how you go from having this 3 billion letter long spiral staircase inside every single one of your cells in your body, to having, well, your body and your cells. Which, you know, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool process, how that all works. It just really shows how complex the entire biological system is, even without hearts or lungs or brains involved. Just a single cell is that complex. That's pretty cool. This is biology in a nutshell with me, Rocket, and if you want more of biology in a nutshell, subscribe, watch, like, and do everything you can to make my life beautiful, because yay. See you all next time. Goodbye.